Hi everyone, it's Laura here for Studio Katia, and in today's video I'm going to show you how to create a birthday card and how to use sentiment stamps to create a custom background. I started off by die cutting some Neenah Desert Storm cardstock using the Scallop Hearts dies by Studio Katia, and then I used one of the dies in the Scallop Square die set, also by Studio Katia, to die cut a window out of this panel. I then went ahead and created my custom background. I stamped the Sentiment Hugs from the Cactus Hugs stamp set by Studio Katia. And I'm trying to obtain a random pattern by stamping the word in different positions and with different orientations. And I'm going to go ahead until I fill up the whole panel. I'm using Memento Dewdrops in Rich Cocoa. This is a dark brown ink. And I really love creating my custom pattern papers using the smaller stamps in the sets. And this time I thought it would be fun to use a sentiment stamp instead. And I have to say that I really like the result. Once I was done creating my background, I moved on and started working on my images. I'm using 3 different images from the Cactus Hugs stamp set by Studio Katia. I am stamping them with hybrid black ink on Neenah Solar White 110 pound cardstock, and then I'm going to color them with my Spectrum Noir markers. I'm going to do some pretty simple coloring, shading the images as if the light was coming from the top right of the screen, so that my highlights are mostly focused on that side of the images as well. I decided to use 3 different color combinations, so 3 different green color combinations, one for each cactus, to give a bit of movement to the card and have a bit of variation going on. So for the first one I used JG6, JG4 and JG2. For the second one I used CG4, CG3 and CG1. And for the third one I used DG3, DG2 and DG1. This is quite a muted combination, so I decided to brighten it up a little bit, and for that I covered the entire area with a CG2 marker after I was done blending my 3 markers together. I used the same color combination to color in all 3 pots, and this is TN6, BO3 and BO2. I started by laying down the shadows with the TN6 marker. I blended that out with my mid-tone marker, which is the BO3, and finally I blended everything towards the highlight with the lightest marker, which is the BO2. Like I did for all the portions of the images, I am following the shape of the images themselves when adding my shadows and my color in general, so that the shading looks a little bit more realistic and I give a nice and three-dimensional appearance to the images. And all in all, the coloring didn't take too long because these images are quite small, so this was quite a quick card to make. For the flowers I used 2 different color combinations, and I used only 2 markers because these areas are really small, so I just needed to add 1 darker marker to give them a little bit of dimension. And once I was done coloring the images, I die cut them with the coordinating dies. And here I'm using a white gel pen to hide the areas where I had colored outside the lines. I used Distress Oxide and the ink smooshing technique to create a background for the window on my card. So I pressed my ink pad on my Easy Clean mat, I activated the ink with water, and then I pressed the paper face down on the ink. I am using a heat tool to dry between layers, and then I'm going to press the paper again on my Distress Oxide until I get the coverage that I'm going for. And to add even more movement to the background, I added some water droplets that I blotted off with a microfiber cloth. And as a last step, to add some shimmer to this panel, I diluted some Perfect Pearls in the color Perfect Pearl and used a paintbrush to add some droplets to the background. For the sentiment, I decided to do some heat embossing with white embossing powder over some black cardstock. I wanted a strip that would run across the whole card front, and I have my cardstock already cut at 5.5 inches width, so the width of my card base. And as you saw, I used the background that I had created with the stamped sentiment to measure exactly the position of the happy birthday sentiment here on my black cardstock. I stamped the sentiment with Versamark ink. I coated it with white embossing powder and then I melted the embossing powder with my heat gun. I used my guillotine trimmer to trim a strip around the sentiment. And then I could go ahead and assemble the card. Because my Distress Oxide panel was a little bit warped because of all the moisture that I had added to it, I used some double-sided tape to secure it to a rectangle that I die cut out of some white cardstock using the Darling Ribbon and Frames dies. I then adhered the stamped background on top, and finally I glued down the 3 cacti in the little window that I created. And I really love this stamp set, it's so cute and really versatile. I glued the sentiment strip on the front of my card, slightly under the window that I have with the cacti. And then to add a few embellishments, I glued down some sequins from the Studio Katia Majestic sequin mix all over the card front. And for that I used a Duo picker and the Studio Katia glue. I mounted everything on a top folding A2 card base, so this is some heavyweight white cardstock cut at 5.5 by 8.5 inches and scored at 4.25 inches. And then I added some finishing touches with a white gel pen all over the plants as well as the pots. And here you can see the final result. I really loved the way this card turned out, and I especially loved the Hugs sentiment stamped all over the background. And I think that this will make a great birthday card for a man as well. And that's it for today. I really hope you enjoyed this video and I hope I inspired you to create with the Studio Katia Cactus Hugs stamp set. Don't forget to subscribe for more inspiration. Thank you all so much for stopping by and have a great day.